Good evening, art lovers. Shrouded in dust and clothed in darkness for the last 30 years, we offer you now an opportunity to again peruse the paintings, to ponder the mysteries of time, dimension, and the darker side of humanity, to glimpse the artifacts of a noted era in television and mystery genre history. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Night Gallery. I'm Leonard Nimoy, your modern-day curator. Please join me for an after-hours tour designed to reveal some of the gallery's long-held secrets. There's no admission fee, no requirement of membership, only a strong and abiding belief in the dark at the top of the stairs and things that go bump in the night.
Good evening. Please come in. These little objects d'art that you see surrounding me, you won't find in your average art museum, because these are unusual paintings and statuary that come to life or death, whatever the case may be, because this is the Night Gallery.
It was indeed over 30 years ago that the original Night Gallery first opened for business, the brainchild of a slight, adamant man in a dark suit, a man who previously had taken us into the Twilight Zone. That man, Rod Serling, viewed the world in quite a unique manner, and he dared to invite us for 3 all-too-short seasons into his unusual world. But his invitation came with a warning. Don't touch the exhibited works, but very frequently, they touch back.
He had a kind of a smirk on his face that he knew something that you didn't, and that he was going to, scare you or frighten you or make you think in a fun way. And that's certainly the way it worked in the Twilight Zone. And, Night Gallery followed along that same way.
It was different from Twilight Zone. I think it was more what the French call fantastique.
Rod Serling was so inventive. He could take so many, almost any natural, normal circumstance and sort of turn it inside out, take it a different direction. And that's what I looked forward to, seeing the show. And of course, when I was invited to be on it, it's what I look forward to as an actor.
Rod always took people into areas and explored things, though fictitiously written. He explored things that people experience quite a bit in one form or another. But nobody in those days had the guts to talk about it.
Good evening. Of course, you're all here by invitation, but don't let it disturb you if these paintings per se don't happen to be your thing. These are rather special paintings, the kind of hangings generally put up with a noose.
He wrote over 1/3 of the segments, and it was a very unique show because it encompassed science fiction, horror, and fantasy in a way that had never been done before on television.
I was a tremendous fan of that show and thought it was a really interesting, poignant, and searching look at the human condition. I thought it was a really amazing anthology series.
He was very witty. He was extremely intelligent. He was a genius. He was very prolific, but he not only wrote a lot, but he wrote a lot of excellent stuff.
I was a big fan of Rod Serling and his work, and he was definitely into spooky stuff, and everybody loves spooky stuff. Oh, I adore it. It's unreal, and I like fantasy, especially harmless fantasy.
Surprised?
Well, I think certainly Rod Serling was part of what made it work. His creativity and his genius.
Inspired by chilling pictures, the gallery was a potent mix of horror, science fiction, and fantasy. A maniacal anthology of Serling's original dramas and adapted stories from the masters of the macabre, including H.P. Lovecraft, Fritz Leiber, and Conrad Aiken. While Mr. Serling's name was indeed part of the show title, he was not the only creative influence behind the workings of the gallery. Veteran producer Jack Laird was the technical mastermind presiding over every intricate component of the show. Eccentric, at times reclusive, Jack Laird spent countless hours at the studio, drafting and redrafting scripts for the oftentimes bizarre and outrageous series. He poured his heart and soul into every aspect of Night Gallery.
Jack was a very strange, talented man. You know, Jack was the guy the studio always called Friday night when they had a sort of a real emergency. They'd give him a pilot or a script on Friday night, and he'd come up with a very good rewrite on Monday morning. But he always was locked in his office. He hated confrontations. He didn't like to go on the set. He didn't like to talk to actors. He lived at the studio.
He was very well known around the studio as a fixer. That is, someone who would take a script that was lacking in some area, they'd put it under Jack's nose, he'd come back 2 days, and it was pristine.
One day I was shooting another show that had been on the back lot all night at Universal, and I'm driving home at 6 in the morning, and I'm going near Jack's building, and I see this strange creature in the bushes leaping around, and I realized to my horror, it's Jack Laird out there with a hose taking a shower at 6 in the morning. And, you know, Starkers, which was not the most fun sight in the world. So that was Jack. He probably just cleaned up, dried off, went back to his typewriter.
Jack was one of the strangest people I've ever met. I mean, he was brilliant, but he lived at the studio. I mean, he had a hot plate. He would sit in his office and type away. Then he'd have a couple of belts. Then he would cook a little can of soup on his hot plate.
He was a little bit cantankerous, and he was always like, "Oh God, what's the matter? What do you think? I mean, what's wrong? John, what's kind of thing." But he was a serious writer, and a talented one.
He was an actor on the show. He starred in several of the vignettes.
Master, what do you think, Master? If I told you once, I've told you 100 times. Go easy on the vermouth!
He made his directorial debut on the show. He directed 2 of the better episodes on the show, Pickman's Model and A Question of Fear.
Good night, all. Wake me when it's over.
Jack was the kind of crazy producer that you would want for a show like this. I mean, there was nothing ordinary about Jack.
Jack Laird sometimes clashed with Rod Serling's personality and his view of the show.
I knew that the relationship between Jack and Rod was strained.
By the middle of the second season, Jack was not even returning Rod's phone calls any longer, because all he would do was fight about the nature of the show. Rod wanted it to be less, as he termed it, inconsistent, whereas Jack was far more interested in being experimental, in being revolutionary, in allowing the directors full reign on style and, bring wild ideas to the table. And I'm sure Rod felt that was the wrong way to go. But, Jack was the producer, and I think the results speak for themselves.
Jack Laird was known for many things, but most importantly, he was notorious for generating opportunities. Whether it was an aspiring director or a young actor looking to get their first shot on screen, Jack welcomed newcomers with open arms. In fact, Jack Laird gave me my first directing job, a 3rd season Night Gallery episode entitled Death on a Barge.
I don't know why, really. I just hid over there, looking at you.
And another noted director's first job behind the lens would become the pilot of Night Gallery. Just 22 years old at that time, and directing the inimitable Joan Crawford was Steven Spielberg.
Everybody was very excited. They wanted to see, what was he going to do? And Joan Crawford, who was the star of that episode, could not have been nicer. Spielberg was terrified to meet her because he had heard all these stories about what a monster she was, which are totally untrue. I mean, if maybe way deep in her past, but, when we met her, she was a lovely, sweet woman.
I want to see some trees, concrete, buildings, grass, airplanes, color!
The idle rich.
And his footage looked like nothing you had ever seen. It was so interesting. You'd watch the dailies, and and you go, I hate this guy. You just get so green and jealous because it was just so imaginative and clever.
Jack came in with a sort of crazy, off-the-wall, let's give young kids a chance to direct, like Spielberg, Johnny Badham. He started, all kinds of directors, Jeannor Szwarc. He would just take chances. He would stick his neck out.
I think I did some of my best work on that, and it's not only me, I think all of us. And I think it's because the show brought what we were capable of out into the open, because it gave us freedom, and it was wonderful material.
Jack had a very keen eye for talent, and I think he was able to see the potential in young talent, and he gave the start to stars such as Lindsay Wagner and Diane Keaton.
Tell me, you've picked your husband out yet?
That's a very personal question to ask a girl.
Who had the luck, skill, and inclination to play amongst the creations? Well, week after week, a diverse group of Hollywood's finest graced the guest list. Sally Field and Vincent Price, Zsa Zsa Gabor and Randy Quaid, Joan Crawford and Ozzie and Harriet, and Night Gallery's personal favorite, John Astin, who was a rather frequent visitor to the gallery as both actor and director.
I'm hip. Well, I'll be the judge of that.
The show was a treasure chest for many of Hollywood's most notable actors, in part because of its notoriety and because of the large amount of attention the show was generating within the industry. There were over 190 different actors in 98 segments that comprised 43 episodes during the 3-year series run. You may recognize a certain particular life form.
There isn't any young actor who doesn't do 3 or 4 lines that doesn't say, well, okay, somebody's going to spot me and now the next part will be bigger. That's always in the back of your mind when you're a kid actor. You can't help it. You get what you pay for in this life, I guess.
Indeed you do, young man. Indeed you do.
I was hired to do, I think, just a line. And I tended to ad-lib a little bit. And I guess I got away with it because they kept it in. I remember doing that and being a young actress and kind of being, afraid did I overstep my bounds, and found that I hadn't.
Nurse!
I didn't want to disturb you, Doctor, but
Dr. Mill! I've got to see Dr. Mill!
that has been going on all evening.
I'll look in on it.
They just said, hey, Rod Serling would like you to do one of the night gallery shows. And you'd play a guy sort of unlike you, maybe not the most favorable character, but would you like to do it? It'd be a dramatic challenge.
How long will my son stay here?
Indefinitely, Mr. Holston.
And when I read the script, I thought, well, I think people are going to understand, since I have 4 kids I love, that this is not Pat Boone. This is a character I'm playing.
Most of the parents prefer it that way.
Roger will be here tomorrow.
Night Gallery was always kind of a spooky type show, and I loved it very much and was thrilled to be invited to do it. And the name of my episode was Pamela's Voice, and I felt that I was chosen particularly because of that raucous laugh that I have, and I can't help that. That is my real laugh.
I shall spend the rest of my eternity talking.
I'm always pleased when anything that I've done, on television especially, like an episode, is recognized and remembered so many years later, because they've been, more than fish in the sea have been episodes of television, so that anybody remembers one, it has to have some sort of quality to it.
Dear God! What have you done to him?
When Night Gallery came, I loved the show. I loved Rod Serling, the whole idea of it. And especially the script, the one script particularly that I did where I played Dracula.
Hi.
I really enjoyed that.
So what time do you expect to be back?
Dawn. We are always back before sunup. Always.
I felt very free to, as an actor, and certainly with my director, Leonard, we felt very free to create and come up with our own sort of take on things. And It was a very creative atmosphere. Not all television is like that. They were willing to explore and take the time to do that and to create something unusual.
Aren't you gonna hold me?
Enthralling as it was for those just getting started creatively, the magic and mystery of the Night Gallery was developed and mined week after week by a highly skilled gathering of individuals, all charged with a different element of the stories to tell. Multiple segments each week meant multiple worlds to create. Images would be brought to chilling life and sometimes disquieting death. Night Gallery was considered groundbreaking for offering a mixed bag of tricks within each and every show. Week after week, the show's directors worked around tight budgets and difficult deadlines to bring to life haunted cemeteries, ghost towns, even terror on the high seas.
Torpedo! There's a torpedo dead ahead!
I was self-taught as a director, so I had a lot of insecurities. You know, I never knew whether I was doing it the right way, between quotes, because I'd never gone to film school. And in a way, Night Gallery opened me up a lot, because suddenly I started really doing what I thought was right in terms of the visual language.
Well, at the time, they had very little budget, and they had to create for like $1.50 a special effect or a photographic effect that would have cost literally thousands of dollars on a studio film. What they had to their benefit was a lot of the guys who worked in the background at Universal Studios had been around since James Whale was making films back in 1931, and they all knew the tricks.
You're working so fast and so quickly, and you have to do shortcuts all the time. You don't have time to spend time with the actors, and you can barely get the shots done that you need to just to tell the story, but you have to find a way to do them interestingly, interesting camera moves, interesting, character concepts, so that the actors seem, unusual and not straightforward. And Night Gallery just would give you every opportunity to go as far as your imagination would allow you to go.
It's heaven, except for the schedule and the budget and all that. It was just heaven. I mean, Jack left us alone. The material was very creative.
And speaking of creativity, observe, if you will, the paintings around me. Some of the sole remaining originals from the show. A colorful combination of paint, pigments, light, and shadow. An integral ingredient to the stories of Night Gallery. In all, artist Tom Wright created over 100 works for the Night Gallery, and bringing these paintings to life was no easy task.
Once I got the idea, I would start working on it right away. And it was basically, as soon as I could get a painting done, what I would do is I would, first of all, get the okay. Here's what we're going to do. Then I would do the painting, and then I would send it down for Universal to frame. I also designed the frames. Calls would come in, letters would come in. People wanting paintings for their bars, for their dens, it was incredible, because the paintings became a major part of the show.
Elaborate sets, art direction, makeup, special effects, and cinematography fused together to awaken the pixels within the portraits. And while the paintings intimated the visual stories, atmospherically distinct and unusual sounds and music led you down the path of the bizarre. Television's most gifted craftsmen would collaborate to blend imagery and sound. A truly unique arrangement of artistry and composition. The opposite of decomposition, if you will.
I paid a lot of dues to come up with this new music. I mean, it may be commonplace today, but in 1969, nobody was playing synthesized electronic music, or certainly not electronic jazz and live performance of it. Today, if you heard the same cue, you'd say, oh, it's a nice piece of electronic music. But back in 1969, it was like, this guy's crazy, this stuff will never fly, this isn't music, It was pretty out there, and Jack, to his credit, backed me all the way, all the time.
I think with Night Gallery, it made me realize that I had to create a challenge with everything that I did. Makeup, to me, is part of the storytelling. Night Gallery is a perfect example because of all the looks and everything.
Ponder, if you will, the familiar faces that adorned the hallowed walls of this nocturnal arcade. For inside every expression and every figure lies a tale waiting to be told, sometimes uncommon, and sometimes a few frescoes of the freakish. Within each and every episode, each and every vignette lives a story within a story. Sometimes a technical feat, sometimes an unusual occurrence, and sometimes things only the educated eye will catch. My directing episode, Death on a Barge, posed budgetary concerns. Shooting at night was a problem, so we used a technique called day for night. We spent an entire day chasing the sun to keep the actors in silhouette. Then, with the sun behind them, the film could be processed so that it appeared to have been shot at night. In my starring episode, She'll Be Company for You, I was directed by Jerry Finneman, who was the original cameraman on the Star Trek series. There's much to watch for below the surface of the obvious, inside the Night Gallery.
One that was such fun, and it wasn't meant to be, was Leslie Nielsen when he played Phantom of the Opera.
That is one of the funniest things you'll ever see in your life, because Leslie Nielsen is in the position of having to, as the Phantom of the Opera, wear this big mask and carry a fully grown woman down about 20 stone steps.
Who are you?
By the time Leslie gets to the bottom of the steps, he's totally exhausted. And as he's talking, the mask is going into his throat and then coming back out and into his throat and coming out.
I am the Scourge of Paris. I am the Phantom of the Opera.
People are saying, for God's sake, Leslie, can't you, not breathe? Oh, you carry this broad down the stairs.
And, Leslie Nielsen, I mean, he'll take anything and run with it.
I'm really proud of the Caterpillar. I think it was the first time Lawrence Harvey did television.
They put it in my ear. Oh, my dear God, they put it in my ear!
It was a fantastic script, but the challenge was in 3 days to create the atmosphere. Everybody remembers that show.
I want to die.
I shouldn't have had the nerve to come here alone,
They are really quite harmless when they're sleeping.
It was an episode called Smile Please with Cesare Danova, who I play a little young British reporter.
I'll be the first person in history to ever photograph a genuine vampire.
I walk in all these British clothes, and they said, well, can you do an English accent? And I tried. It was terrible, but I did it anyway because it was campy. They said, that's fine, go ahead.
But the coffin's empty.
Tim Riley's bar distilled the essence of Rod Serling at that time.
Our first offering this evening, faces. Paint, pigment, and desperation. The quiet desperation of men over 40 who keep hearing footsteps behind them and are torn between a fear and a compulsion to look over their shoulders. The painting is called They're Tearing Down Tim Riley's Bar.
It's a story of regret, and it's a story of things not done in life and not being able to deal with the present and only being able to find happiness in the past.
It may be that you decide to call downtown for the Psycho Squad, but something different has been happening to me. I keep getting beckoned to by ghosts.
Tim Riley's bar is definitely the one to watch.
I'm your tour guide through this unusual salon of unusual statuary and paintings. These are the sort of things that may not please you, but very likely may chill you, because this is the Night Gallery.
In the words of Rod Serling, if you seem to sense an aura of cold dampness that permeates this room, attribute it not to either defective air conditioning or inclement weather. It's simply because this is rather a special place with special statuary and special paintings. And they carry with them a coldness that seems to go best in a crypt or a place like this called the Night Gallery. Rod Serling's words, and more importantly, his vision, are still as thought-provoking today as they were when he first began his career over a half-century ago. Twisting time and space, blurring fantasy and reality, the cavernous walls of Rod Serling's Night Gallery remain intact for your viewing pleasure. Still as puzzling and disturbing as ever, this dark and demented gallery awaits you. Until we meet again, I'm Leonard Nimoy.
I never knew what I was going to run into when I would show up for work.
But I never fantasized that 30 years later, I'd be talking about it.
For it to be recognized as a classic 30 years later, very proud to be part of it.
It was fun. For me, it was all fun. It was all new. It was all learning.
Welcome to the Night Gallery.
I would have liked to have done a lot more of the episodes. It was too bad I got canned, you know.
I felt at home with Night Gallery. I loved the material, I loved the genre, it was very daring.
What a privilege for me to work with Rod Serling on Night Gallery.
I think it really works because you don't look at the series as a whole. Instead, you look at the segments themselves, each individual story.
I'm glad I came along then and glad I got to be part of it.
Night Gallery was groundbreaking because it took risks.
It was an exercise in creative imagination. I mean, I don't know how else you can describe it.
I'm very proud to have been a part of that anthology series.
I'm just sorry that Rod Serling isn't alive to bask in the beauty of his work.